Hello, everybody. I'm here today to answer a really important question that nobody asked. Today, we're going to be talking about what if Texas was an island instead of Texas? How did it get there? Would it still be part of the USA? What would happen to all of the oil? Would it have the same aura? And maybe the most important question here, would Buc-ee's still exist? Let's figure out the answers to all these really important questions. Obviously, this isn't the case. No shit. But I thought about it and I was like, this could be an interesting idea to maybe go off of for a little while on my YouTube channel. So let's do it. Let's talk about it. I researched this a little bit. Let's get into it. My name is Matt, and once again, I'm not exploring outside, but rather exploring my living room couch, talking about a stupid thing that doesn't exist. Subscribe. Okay, so Texas Island. First things first, right off the bat, this could have never happened ever. Because, plate tectonics and stuff. But to be more specific, it's because of the North American plate. Let's call it the NAP for this scenario. The NAP contains the entire continent of North America. And Texas is sort of like firmly embedded in something called a craton, which is basically just like a giant immovable layer of crust from like the Precambrian era. And in order for Texas to become separated from the North American landmass, there would basically have to be like a series of rifts that formed around the exact perimeter of Texas. And rifts in the crust don't just form randomly. They usually follow like weak zones. Where Texas is, it's all very kind of firmly there. So Texas is glued to North America for the most part. For Texas to just move away, that would mean that Texas would just kind of have to randomly become the weakest part of the North American plate, which not happening. So this is all for funsies, okay? This would never happen ever. But we can still have a little fun. We can still have a little fun with this idea. So for the sake of this demonstration, we got to use our imagination a bit, all right? We got to fire up the old noggin for this one. So try really hard to stick with me and think about this, okay? Let's assume that a supernatural entity, alien spaceship destroyer thing of some sort visits Earth 10 million years ago, okay? It's like this 10 million years ago, before humans exist, but the continents are still mainly intact for the most part, but humans don't exist yet, okay? Okay, so this supernatural entity visits Earth, looks at North America, and goes, I don't really like where this thing is right here on the bottom here. Let's cut out this shape for no reason, this exact shape that I randomly decided. And we're going to shoot our massive laser into the ground and just grab it and just move it over here into the water. There's plenty of room for it over here. Let's just grab this and move it. Boom. Okay, so it's 10 million years ago, and Texas is now sitting over here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's just there. And whenever we decide to exist, us humans, we're going to find it there. But how long would it take for humans to find this place? Spoiler alert, actually longer than you'd think. So almost certainly the Polynesian people would be the first people to find Texas. They were the first group of people to really like colonize the Pacific Ocean and kind of visit all those islands for the first time. And an island as big as Texas would kind of be hard to miss. And also it wouldn't be that hard to find for them because the Polynesian people were very skilled navigators. And like low-key, they were goated at this shit. They would have used things like seabird colonies and ocean swells and even the stars to figure out where Texas is. And it would have been pretty easy for them. Texas is so big. The weather patterns around major islands, like it's all different. Ocean swells can be different up to like 100 miles away, and they would watch the seabirds and see where they migrate, and it wouldn't be that hard basically. Also, can you imagine traveling in the Pacific Ocean on a canoe? Hell no. Everybody real quick hit the Polynesian respect button for the one time. They had a lot more balls than me, and probably most of us. So based on where Texas is in this hypothetical scenario, that would mean that Polynesians would reach it in around the year 1200 or so. Europeans, the white folk, wouldn't have reached it until around 1700. That's like a good 500 years for them to kind of like colonize and like live on the island. So that's a lot of time. But it is possible that some Spanish explorers could have maybe found it in like the 1600s. Okay, so the year is 1200. Polynesians find Texas Island and they're like, yo, this place is the shit. This would immediately become like the hub for all like ocean dwelling people. Like Texas has everything they need. I mean, it's a whole new world pretty much. This is basically like a continent. You know, it's not really, but it's crazy. So this would immediately become super important for them. Yeah, they'd be like, damn, this is awesome. But let's fast forward to a bit closer to modern times. Let's fast forward to around 1700 when the white folk arrive. Because of the consistent rainfall and the fertile soil and all this land, Texas population would boom. The population would probably be like several 100,000 in the 1700s, which is pretty good for an island. That's pretty good. But the culture of Texas would be a lot different than the Texas that we know today. At this point, it's probably a lot more like Hawaii than like Texas. It wouldn't be anything like cowboys on the open frontier type of vibe. Instead, it would kind of be more like a giant desert New Zealand type of thing going on. And because of the absence of North American history, there would be no horses, no wheeled vehicles, no real metal tools, no Spanish colonial legacy, no USA Civil War, no Mexican Revolution, no cowboys and Indians, none of that. When the Europeans arrived sometime in the 1700s, they would have brought things like iron and potatoes and muskets and horses and wheat, cattle, things like that. And the Europeans probably would have brought some conflicts to the island, just like they did everywhere else. They would have brought like diseases and war and, you know, all that fun stuff, just like they did on Hawaii and the other Polynesian islands like New Zealand. Like they'd probably do it again. Eventually, I'm sure there would be lots of wars fought and treaties and agreements made and unhappy people and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fast forward again. Now it's the 1900s and the island of Texas is now a recognized sovereign nation with populations in like the hundreds of thousands, maybe even the millions at this point. They have an army, they have maybe even a navy. It's the real deal at this point. Now let's ask some really important questions. Would Texas become part of the United States if it was never part of North America to begin with? I kind of went back and forth on this one because I wasn't sure, but the answer I came to was probably not, because the USA at this point has like no territorial claim over Texas whatsoever. And Texas at this point is so big and so established as a nation that the US can't really just come in and be like, hey, you're mine now, since it's not attached to the US. But what about Hawaii? Silence. Hawaii circumstances were a little bit different. Hawaii had like way less people, way less landmass. The island of Texas at this point has like millions of people living on it, and it's like 40 times as big as Hawaii. So any attempt to take it over would basically be like an act of war, and Texas at this point probably has like treaties with European nations. So the US probably wouldn't want to risk going to war with like their biggest allies over this island. I just don't think it would happen. With Hawaii, it was more like a big country kind of just bullying a smaller island nation. But what about the oil? I'm glad you asked that question, because if there's one thing that America loves, it's that goddamn oil. Real Texas today has one of the biggest oil fields in the world, and you can bet your sweet ass that the US would want a piece of that pie. So, assuming Texas has the exact same geology, oil would be discovered sometime in the 1900s. They would be like, hey guys, we saw you have this and we want to set up and do our thing here and we'll make you really rich and give you lots of money. And then Texas would be like, I don't know. And then the USA would be like, hey, so we're going to low-key do this whether you like it or not. So then agreements are made and the USA starts drilling for oil in Texas. Island Texas. But Texas would still remain legally independent. During World War II, in the mid-1900s, the USA would probably sign like a mutual defense treaty with Texas that allows them to have like military bases there. Texas in this scenario is prime real estate for World War II military base. It would be an alliance, but not like a full, complete occupation. The location is simply too strategic to pass up. And Texas would have probably fought along the Allies in World War II, as many other Polynesian countries did. And then after World War II, Texas would probably join the United Nations and basically become what Hawaii never got the chance to do. Sorry, Hawaii. Okay, so we've talked about Texas enough. Island superpower. It's got like a unique Polynesian culture. But wait, there's a glaring problem that I haven't talked about yet. There's now a giant gaping hole in the United States where Texas would have been. Do you think they would be suspicious that the island in the Pacific Ocean has the exact proportions of what they're missing? Realistically, they probably would have figured it out, like that something happened, but whatever. Obviously, this would change the US quite a lot, so let's talk about it very briefly. Here's a picture that I made demonstrating what this would look like. I made this very skillfully in Photoshop, and I have aptly named the body of water where Texas used to be the Mexican Sea. Without Texas, the USA would be a lot smaller and a lot less rich. And if there's one thing the USA loves, it's money. Which is fun. I mean, you'd think so, but they're like trillions of dollars in debt. Whatever. If you didn't know, Texas is nearly 9 to 10% of the USA's entire GDP. So they're basically missing out on several trillion dollars. And also, Texas is like 7% of the United States' entire landmass. So basically, they're down bad. And instead of massive ranches and agriculture that Texas is known for today, all that production would be shifted up north to states like Kansas and Nebraska. Also, railroads would have to be built going through all those states up north instead of just going through Texas. And instead of the oil coming from Texas, the Permian Basin, which again is like one of the biggest oil fields in the world, the USA would have to mainly drill for oil in states like New Mexico and North Dakota. That's if the USA even had control of like Western America to begin with. Because if Texas was never part of North America to begin with, the history of North America would be crazy different. In 1845, the annexation of Texas was a major contributing factor to the Mexican-American War. For those who don't know, the war ended in 1948, and Mexico was forced to give up 55% of their land, including all of California, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado. So if Texas never existed, the annexation of Texas would have never happened. And then in turn, there's a real possibility that the Mexican-American War never happened, and these states got to just remain part of Mexico, which would obviously make Mexico a much stronger nation and, probably on par with the United States. But at the same time, we all know how the USA was moving at this time, so, there's a good chance they would have taken it anyways, because that's what Americans like to do. They like to take shit. But it's still interesting to think about. Also, the climate in the USA would be way different if there's now a giant sea where Texas is. It would basically be a lot more humid further inland, and the winters, especially in the Midwest, would be a lot more mild. Also, hurricanes would reach places like Kansas and Nebraska, which is just weird to think about. And since it's so flat up there, lots of flooding would occur. Obviously, more rain, hurricanes, tropical storms. Oklahoma and New Mexico would become beach states. And even Arkansas would have like a little corner that has a beach on it, which is really weird. To sum this all up, the United States would still be a superpower, but it would be much more dependent on trading for oil and other resources that Texas provides. And island Texas would be mogging the shit out of the United States from the ocean. And Buc-ee's would probably never exist. Sorry. If you made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening to me yap. I hope you enjoyed it. Go check out my other videos. You already know what to do, man. Hit the button, hit the bell, hit the thumbs up, hit everything. Let me know down below what you think of this. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.